We're going to get started. Everybody please find a seat either in the main room here or in the room next door.
No, I'm going to be here. I'll see you later. Yeah, Mommy's
Come on, you're small font, single space. We have some seats up front here, I think, if anybody wants to come up. They're reserved? Yeah. Okay, you're still waiting for people to come in? Okay. Smart. Maybe longer than we think.
I didn't know how to change it on the computer.
Is everybody seated across the way? Are we ready to go?
We're just getting my kids.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us here tonight as we celebrate the life of our dear friend, dear colleague, Doug Morrison. My name is Glenn Blackman. I've been fortunate enough to know Doug almost half my life, and we were very close. For those of you who are here, once again, thank you. I recognize half of you. From the eyes up, some I recognized, some we did not. We're going to have a list of speakers this evening as we pay tribute to our dear friend, our dearly departed friend, Doug. I'm going to start with probably more than a few words, but some words. As many of you, or some of you may know, I'm the most senior surviving spouse. If you know, Doug and I kind of had a bromance. People would always say to me or him, "Where's your spouse today?" It wasn't unusual that Doug and I, whether it was a CSEA event or one of our field trips, we were the most likely to room together. And that raised everybody's eyebrows. So there we go again. Doug and Glenn are rooming again. So, you know, knowing Doug the way I did, I sometimes stop to wonder and think if our bromance actually started before Doug's actual dating life. You know, knowing Doug, it's hard to tell. But long before I met Doug, I knew the Morrison family. I knew them for many years. I knew his mom, Judy, very, very well, and at times I considered her my work mom. Judy and I would talk regularly about our children and her grandkids, Dory's children at the time. We shared baby clothes with Dory and Dory's family. We had no limits to our discussions. We would come in, we would talk, we would chat. She would even cry to me when we spoke about Doug's dad, Dave, as he was going through his treatments and the long trips that they made out to Yale for his treatments. But in my conversations with Judy, one thing always came across, and that was what's ever going to become of her son, Doug? The wanderer, Mr. Independent, essentially carefree. But Judy had an uncanny sense to know that Doug had a real heart of gold and that helping others was going to be very instinctive for him. When Doug was finally hired by CSEA, she was so happy. While I only knew him slightly when he was first hired as an organizer, once he moved to Region 3 as an LRS, we quickly became very close friends. He would always call me his mentor and quickly belittle his own abilities. But that was Doug, and hardly an accurate picture. To some, we may have considered him the original Uber. Some may think he was the original Mr. Met. But for most of us, undeniably, we could call him Mr. Procrastination. As for my memories with Doug, we embarked on many a road trip, some famous and some not so famous. Car shopping was always an adventure for the two of us. And again, Mr. Procrastination, very hard to make a decision. We even had one famous road trip to Hackensack. Sorry, buddy. It was one we made, should not have made. Believe it or not, Doug was an avid shopper for shoes. He could not resist a stroll through Bass, one of his favorite places to go. As for his shoe fetish, I think that was something he bonded much closer to his buddy Tom with, because as I recall, one day, my daughter came home from the mall and told me she saw Doug in DSW with some guy. And she said, "What's up with that?" Yes, we even did golf trips. Doug was not the avid golfer, but he participated. We did trips to the Poconos, we did trips to Atlantic City. One thing I know for sure was he could throw a golf club further than he could hit a golf ball. But let it be known that we even wasted our money together on such things as a golf club membership at Southern Duchess, where I think we played a total of 3 rounds. My wife doesn't need to know that. And we also tried to enjoy a gym membership together. Well, needless to say, that didn't go very far either. I was an avid skier growing up, so when Doug and I found that we both enjoyed skiing, we did a few ski trips together. And we even spoke recently of starting to do some more as we were looking upon enjoying some of our retirement. And I certainly can't forget the sporting events that we went to. Yes, I dragged him to some Yankee games along with some other coworkers. And occasionally we would agree to go see the Mets. And I would take him to the Nets, being a Nets fan, and his short-lived season's tickets to the Jets. Together we had some high hopes of retirement travels together. But we know that, unfortunately, has passed. So, Doug and I were commonly called the Three Amigos. Well, Doug and I are 2, but we had a dear departed friend, Carl, and he was one of the 3 buddies that you could always find the 3 of us together, whether it was at work, on the golf course, at a conference, or just hanging out and chatting. It later grew into what became known as the Lunch Bunch, and we started to bring more and more people into our circle, and we had wonderful friends as this Lunch Bunch. We even did some travel together as a group. But when we got to lunch, people didn't realize that not only would we discuss sports, family was a big topic, and we discussed a lot of work issues. Doug was always looking to bounce something off of somebody and had input, and he was dedicated to his work. Uncle Doug, as he was known to my children, we would call upon him to pick them up from school, practices, and yes, even the rare hospital trip he would go get my daughter. He would show up at my daughter Lindsay's softball games, an occasional basketball of my son Alex's, and he was so much considered an uncle to my 2 children. I have to say, Carrie, I hope you're listening, or I hope that you eventually see the crowd that came out to pay their respects to your father, who was so loved by so many people. And you need to know how much your father loved and adored you. You will never know how much your father sacrificed to keep you in his life. Jen, Audrey, Peyton, Landon, You could always be counted on to bring a smile to his face. You were truly family to him, and he loved you guys. Finally, Rhonda. Thank you. Thank you a million times over for always being by his side, taking care of and supporting my dear friend. Doug, I will miss you every day and will never forget the memories. Thank you. Our next speaker is going to be Doug's baby sister, who embarrassingly I didn't recognize, who I've actually known longer than I've known Doug. Doug's dear sister, Dory Homer.
That's hard to follow.
I definitely should have picked the bigger font. Just want to thank you all for coming. My brother Dave couldn't be here. His family has COVID. He's very upset. I just wanted you all to know. As you all know, Doug was not religious. He didn't really want a funeral, and he made sure we understood that. But as the time grew nearer, he thought it might be okay for a little something. Tom could speak. It would be okay. We want to acknowledge what a wonderful man he was. So this is a celebration of his life. I'm sure I'll have a lot of explaining to do when we meet again. I'm just hopeful time will soften him up. First and foremost, he adored his daughter, Carrie. He was very proud of her. He would tell me how he enjoyed their conversations about politics and current events in this crazy world right now, and I know he loved that she had an interest. I hope she can see how many people loved and admired her dad. We are so grateful to Rhonda and her family for bringing so much love to Doug. He always told me how special Rhonda was, and when I asked him, does she mind you being such a slob? He'd smile, and he'd just say, she's just like me. So I knew it was a perfect match. Thank you, Rhonda, for taking such wonderful care of him. Doug always looked after me. When we were little, we ran away, just to the crawl space. I don't think we were actually mad at our parents. It was more of an adventure. He made sure we had cream soda and some candy to sustain us. We probably didn't even last an hour, but he was always made sure I was looked after. I'm sure I was the pesky little sister, but he'd let me tag along to play running bases with Tommy and to go to the lake to ice skate. One of his favorites was playing 52 card pickup. He would trick Terry and I into that all the time. Being I was 4 years younger, he'd coax me into helping him make his sandwiches. He'd say, Dory, you make those grilled cheeses so good. Can you just teach me one more time? And of course, I'd do it. One time, he wanted to go out with his friends, but he had to mow the lawn. My father gave him strict instructions. So I lost the card bet, and I ended up mowing the lawn. I ran over the newspaper, shreds of newspaper all over the yard. So needless to say, he had to help me pick it up because he'd be in trouble with my father for either tricking me or being stupid enough to run over the lawn, the newspaper. He never asked me to mow again. He always looked out for me. Again, still letting me tag along as I got older. He and Janice would take us on their dates to the drive-in. They'd let us go to the Jersey Shore with them. He taught me how to drive. And it's funny, so many people have reached out to me with their fond memories of Doug, and I have realized I think he taught every kid in Dutchess Park. No wonder all the parents loved him. One time, Tara and I were sneaking into Henry's bar with fake ID, probably Janice's. And who showed up and sat in the corner with Billy Riley, just making sure I'd be okay. He didn't make me leave. He didn't tell my parents. He just made sure I was okay. That was Doug. As we got older, we became great friends. We'd go on vacations together with the Blairs and the Curtises and Janice, of course, to the Outer Banks. And they would do their Smokey and the Bandit impressions relentlessly, I might add. My husband Bill and Doug became best of friends. Doug was the best man at our wedding. And while they were unemployed for a brief time, they called themselves the Men of Leisure. John Burrell. When Bill and I moved to Virginia, Doug, of course, helped us move, because that's what he always did. While the Men of Leisure were looking for work, they had some downtime. They worked at the tennis game. I would pull up after my day of work, and they were on the court, and they'd yell out to me in the car, "Hey, what's for dinner?" They just thought that was the funniest thing. Eventually, they grew up and they both got jobs. Everyone that knew Doug loved him. My kids adored him. He'd always get right in there with them, with his nieces and nephews, and play. He'd try to teach Cody about football, and he'd throw the popcorn at the TV when the Giants screwed up. He was always interested in their lives. He'd ask me right up until the end, and I know he was so proud of them. Doug was the type of man that would help you out, but never made you feel like you were actually asking. He would show up to help you put up a pool. He'd drive you to the airport because you were bringing your daughter back to go to college, and he knew I'd be devastated, and he wouldn't want me to drive alone. He never had any questions. He never wanted praise. When Doug was diagnosed in July, he knew it wasn't good, and he told me often, "You need to prepare yourself." Again, always looking out for me. One particular night, he was really struggling, and I sat with him, and he said he's ready. I, of course, was not. But he kept apologizing, because that's what he did. He never wanted me to feel bad. He always tried to make it better for me. He's always been my rock. And I'm crushed by my loss, but I look back and I realize how lucky I have been my whole life. I had Doug. I'm so sad for those people who didn't have a Doug. There was no better human on this earth better than him. All of us here are so lucky we had a Doug.
Next up is Tom Burrell, lifelong friend of Doug's. He's the shoe shopper, by the way.
There are moments in a person's life that one has to come to face. Today's one of them. They say God takes the good ones first. Whoever quoted that got it right. I think I can say we all knew Doug pretty well. He went by many names: Honey, Dad, Grandpa, Uncle Doug, Doogie, Uncle Doogie, my second dad, best friend, colleague, and friends, just to name a few. I can call him my best friend. My friendship was almost 60 years. I knew him from the moment he came to Dutch's Park, and I knocked on that door at the Morrison's house, and I said, "Would you like to play?" Do you know, he was a poster child for open heart surgery? Think about it, how many lives he saved. It's pretty amazing, really. He turned out to be a great man with what? A beautiful heart. There's no one like him. He couldn't be replaced. He was kind. He was caring. He was loving. And as everyone's been saying all along tonight, always caring about others. I am sure, because we all have stories, and they're uncountless, time and time again. So many of the things, but I want to share some of the funny things with Uncle Doogie. Do you know when he was a kid, his favorite food? Peanut butter and jelly. He loved peanut butter and jelly. He also loved swimming in the pool with Bruin. That was his dog, okay? He'd jump off the floor, off the building, into the water. And we used to throw the ball back and forth at Billy and Dory or anybody. He loved playing in the dirt. He loved snow. Favorite books? Go Dog Go. And Green Eggs and Ham. And he always shared them. But the one thing I will cherish with him was playing baseball and football with our friends. Let me tell you, in baseball, we played on many teams, together and apart. But when it came to football, I hated him. I absolutely hated him. He would hit you so hard. He was good, he was quick, he was fast, and he was smart. But he was always kind, and Tommy would know. He would pick you up, but he'd never hurt you. Never. However, you knew when you were in a game with him, when you played against him. My brother John always hated to go up against him. I wish I could have played like him. He was special. As we grew older, our journeys had brought us to different directions and paths. But you know, we never parted as friends. He was always there to help him, Billy, Teresa, Dory, myself. And he never judged me for all my faults. He was always supportive. Little things you guys might not know. Dougie stayed with me, and he stayed in contact with me. I thought we would grow old together. Then one day, he was sitting in my garage, and I knew he was fighting something. He never told me. When he finished his coffee, he got up, laughed, and smiled at me, and he said something I always say to him. It's not temporary goodbye, it's I'll see you later. I love you. I said, I love you too. And then he left. Shortly later, he crossed Rainbow Bridge and Bruin met him. Please, for a minute, let's just give him a moment of silence for one reason. He would hate me for it. On Monday, my daughter gave me a cardinal. And she said, Dad, it will help you remember those that we have lost. I saw a cardinal on Monday. So it's not goodbye, but it's a temporary. I see you later. I love Dougie. He was Doogie, my best friend. And you know what? I will never forget. I don't think anybody here will never forget that loving, caring man. I loved him. He was a great guy. Our next speaker is somebody who is very near and dear to Doug. It's about the most I can say to introduce somebody that he cared so much, and admired and loved. Our next speaker is Audrey.
For as long as I can remember, I would always have a competition with Doug, whether it was running up a hill or debating something about the Mets and Yankees. This was because I'm such a competitive person, and Doug just goes with it. I would like to think that no one sees it as a battle lost to cancer, because trust me, Doug didn't lose. He's just starting a new journey. In his new journey, I believe that he's at Fenway Park in 1986 celebrating the Mets beating the Red Sox. Also, if you're a Red Sox fan, you have some questionable life choices. Before I got older, or what Mimi and Doug like to say is too cool for my grandparents, I would stay with them every other weekend. On these days, Doug would call Mimi on his way home. I always knew that when she got that call, it was time for me to hide so I could scare Doug. I still find this one of the funniest things because Doug always acted like it actually scared him. On the weekends, Doug and I would play dolls or card games with me because Mimi was too busy buying something she didn't need. She still does this, and it makes Christmas shopping very, very difficult. Mimi being Mimi went to bed early, and Doug and I always watched NCIS or Law and Order. This didn't happen without a late night snack of some sort. Doug loves his snacks. I never realized how patient Doug was. I mean, he would literally sit on the couch with me for 45 minutes while I would put half a bottle of Mimi's gel on his head. He always looked like a dinosaur after. And on car rides, I would blast music that I assumed Doug isn't a fan of. But he was a trooper and listened to whatever I wanted, and the volume was very, very loud. It gets better though. While the music plays, I'd sing my heart out at the top of my lungs and Doug wouldn't even say a word. As I've matured, but still listen to the same music, I found what I'm most passionate about: volleyball. Doug drove me to practices and watched all my games. Even during COVID, he would watch the live streams. He also pushed through the beating hot sun during my softball games. I give him so much credit for that because those games are something else. This year, Doug and I clicked the most with college. Starting high school this year, I made it a priority to start planning for college to get a grasp on what I wanted to do after high school. Doug and I would discuss and told me we would visit campuses once I got a little older. I know more specifically he wanted me to go to Duke. He would go on and on about how amazing Duke was. A couple weeks ago, I finished my top 10 college list and showed Doug. I'm pretty sure he was very proud of me. Doug might not be able to come to our colleges with me physically, but he will be here. We have to remember that Doug isn't gone. He's still with us in spirit and in our hearts. In the course of the next 3 years, Doug, Mimi, and I will be touring college campuses all over the country, including Duke.
I must apologize for that, Audrey. I'm sorry, but for those of you who didn't figure it out, Audrey is Rhonda's beloved granddaughter. Our next speaker is another one of the twosomes of Tom's. Another lifelong friend of Doug's, a very dear friend of his, who Doug had shared many of his thoughts and memories with me, and I feel as though I know him without knowing him. Our next speaker is Tom Blair.
In the last few days, I've been trying to figure out how to sum up 50 years of friendship. My wife Kathy asked me the other day, "What are you going to say?" And I said, "I'll do what I do at work and just wing it." But last night, I texted Keith, said I've been drinking a little much. I think I better write something. So at 2 a.m., after a few drinks, I tried to put together some thoughts. So if you bear with me, I'm going to read it because if I don't, I'll probably end up in a lettering mess. So I first met Doug in 1970 in the 4th grade playground at Brincroft Elementary School. In the 50 years since, we've had many adventures and some misadventures. We sometimes cried, but we mostly laughed. In the last few days, I've tried to focus on the laughs instead of the tears. And those of you who know me know that's kind of difficult. I'm an eternal pessimist. So looking on the bright side of things just is quite a challenge for me. But the other day, Dory asked for some pictures, and I started going through it. We had almost 50 years of pictures of me and Doug, and some of them you've seen here today. And that made me feel the good times and the laughs coming through over the tears. The good thing about being 60 years old and still having your childhood friends is that, you can talk and laugh and still argue about things that happened 50 years ago, or 40 years ago, or 30 years ago, or 20 years ago. Like Doug's catching ability. Doug was a catcher on our baseball team, and after one game, we're mingling about, and someone came up to us and said, "Who is that old Ironsides behind the plate?" And Doug was right there, and he said, "That was me." In the same game, or a different game, we laughed because I was playing first base, and somehow I managed to throw a ball of 10 feet, and it rolled to Doug. So 50 years of old Ironsides, and you can't even throw the ball for the home plate. But, these are the memories that become a part of us. And I think a great illustration is 10 years ago, I had a cord of wood delivered to my house, and it's sitting in my driveway. And it's been there, and I got a stack. It's like, "Oh, Doug." And I said, "What are you doing?" And of course, Doug being Doug says, "Nothing, what do you got?" And I said, "You want to come and help me stack some wood?" And he laughed, and he said, "Okay, but I'm only going to do it once." And immediately, I laughed and said, "Yeah, we're only going to do it once." And we were both thinking about a time about 30 years before, when we were in the Morrison's backyard, and Doug's father, Dave, had a pile of wood. So he asked Doug and I to stack it. And we stacked it not once, not twice, but 3 times. All the time, Doug's father calling us an Ichabod. I really never understood what an Ichabod was. But to this day, whenever Doug did something stupid, I would look to him and said, "Don't be a damn Ichabod." And he would laugh. And I think those of you who know Doug's father would appreciate that. Through the years, whether during the good times, which was, playing sports, Tommy, all those football games down at Brickerhoff when we were like, 9 or 10, and baseball, Billy, Keith, in the 70s, and then we both found ourselves in DC in the 80s, many trips to the Outer Banks in the 80s and 90s, and then our baseball trips in the 2000s. I mean, some really good times. But over the course of 50 years, there's many tragedies, Doug had tragedy, we all have tragedies, our friends had tragedies. But we were always there for one another. And I think that sums up Doug. He was always there. We were there for him. He was there for us. Over the years, we would take these yearly baseball trips. And I think for those of you who don't know, Doug, Keith, Todd, Steve, and I would pick a city each year, and we'd go and we'd watch baseball games. And we'd have a great time. And these trips became so regular that at work, during the trip, I would just say baseball trip. And they knew right away, don't schedule anything for Tom that week because it was baseball trip week. And, I would describe this to people. People, they would ask, what's a baseball trip? And I said, I get together with my elementary school friends and we do something. And they were shocked. Most people are shocked.
Right.
You still hang out with your elementary school friends?
Speak. Say.
Yeah. And they would always just say, that's just amazing. Yeah. It's amazing that you would have that group of friends that are so tight still after 40, 50 years. I never really thought anything of it. I just seemed it was normal. These are people that I've known all my life. We're friends, we do things. But over the last few days, I really reflected about what a true, Doug would say, fortune. A religious person would say blessing. But it really is a blessing that we were all so close and enjoyed those times. In reflecting on these past 50 years, I can say that Doug was the most honorable, generous, kind people you would ever meet. He probably took more people to the airport than an Uber driver. And literally, I know, people would call up Doug with a problem in the middle of the night, and he would just jump out of bed and say, "I'll be there." He never expected anything from it. Never wanted anything for that kindness. And I think perhaps Doug's reward for all those acts of kindnesses was Rhonda. Rhonda's been Doug's rock. She provided the love and support that he so deserved. During these last few months, she's been heroic in her efforts. And many times I visited Doug over these last few months, and he was in bad shape. And Rhonda was just so optimistic, so supportive. It was really amazing. You know, I'm saddened that our friendship ends. We won't be having any more adventure. He will be with me, and I believe he's with all of you. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Just a little enlightenment. I knew Doug's baseball trips too. I never participated, but I'm still not convinced that baseball trip was code for something else.
Let me just say that I asked Todd, do we have any photos? He said, all we do is no photos.
Now I know why I was never invited. Another one of Doug's dear lifelong friends, a baseball trip participant, Keith Curtis.
Ah, boy, I don't know. Let's liven this up. I can't follow Dory, Tom. They said everything. The double Tom. I'm not a write down person. I'm like Doug. We weren't into school. We met. I moved to Dutchess Park Elementary School, second grade, 1968, 1969. I'm the new kid on the block. Let's keep it real, black kid. So I'm the outcast, not like the group. And he comes up to me, he says, "You want to play G.I. Joe?" The hell do I know about G.I. Joe? It's 1968. I said, okay. We were best friends ever since then. Like Tom said, talk to friends from previous jobs, you know, who do you know? People are to keep in contact with friends, whatever, from college. High school is one thing, but elementary school, think about that. That's Doug. When Doug committed, he committed. Whether you liked it or not, he didn't give a damn. Because he was committed. You could say stubborn as a mule, or you can just say passionate. He was passionate about Ron. I thank God for you. You were his passion. His sister, his brother, his mother, his father, his friends. Any friends, the ones that are not here. I wish you were here, but you're watching us. But he was passionate about anything he did. The Mets, the Giants. I ain't never seen a white man get kicked out of his own damn house. Mr. Morrison said, "Get the hell out." You gotta go. Mrs. M said, no, Dave, he can stay. Mr. Morrison said, no, he gotta get the hell out. But y'all know, Doug is the godfather of my daughter. So I was the young spring gun of us. Had the first child between Tom, Todd, us. Everybody knows Lynette, my first wife. There was no consensus. Doug, the godfather of our child, you know. And we have a picture. Chloe was special. Chloe wouldn't even sleep with her own father. Doug comes over. Chloe has a bottle. She wouldn't even feed from me. I even had those little fake things, you know what I'm saying? wouldn't even feed from me. When I was breastfeeding, Doug comes over, puts a bottle in her mouth, she's sucking on a bottle and falls asleep. There's a beautiful picture of our daughter, Chloe, our first daughter, sleeping on Doug. A white guy, you sleep on a white guy? Come on, man. But that's Doug. Doug didn't see color, race, creed, whatever. He didn't see anything negative in anybody. He saw positive in everybody. That's why we have a room full of people here today, and there's an overflow. And this isn't even enough. There's people zooming live, what do you call live streaming, whatever. There's people all over the world, I believe, looking out for our friend, family, whatever he was. Doug Morrison, that was Craig, DC, touched more people than that's here in this room right now. Doug Morrison touched the world. Think about that. Think if I'm lying, tell me something. And this is all I want to say to Rhonda. Just a little poem. I'm not a poem person, right? Okay. So, this is called Feel No Guilt in Laughter. Okay? Yeah, hold on. I'm sorry. Feel no guilt in laughter. He know how much you care. Feel no sorrow in a smile that is not here to share. You cannot grieve forever. He would not want you to. He'd hope that you could carry on the way you always do. So talk about the good times and the way you showed you cared. The days you spent together, all the happiness you shared. Let the memories surround you. A word someone may say will suddenly recapture a time, an hour, a day that brings him back as clearly as though he were still here, and fills you with the feeling that he is always near. For if you keep those moments, you will never be apart, and he will live forever, locked safely in your heart. That's from me to you. That's from me to you. And I close. I lost my wife 3 years ago, not to disrespect Doug, but to give him the homage and respect. Doug came to my house. She didn't know. She didn't like Tom. You don't have to say that. It is what it is. She loved Doug. We had a bedroom, a suite downstairs. So, and I was gonna bring it. So my wife was from South Carolina. She's a little Oompa Loompa from South Carolina, South Carolina country girl, and she drank moonshine. And they made it themselves, called it Stump. Doug didn't drink, but he did what he did, and he picked us all up back in the 70s and 80s. We made a phone call to Doug, we got in trouble. Yo, Doug, come get us. He come get us. Couldn't rely on nobody else. I'm drunk. Billy Rod drunk. Tom Blair sleep. Tom Burrell sleep. Sleep. All right. So, called Doug. So, comes to my house. And Steph's there. And Doug went shot for shot, drinking moonshine, and she got his respect. The next day, they were supposed to leave. Doug tore up. Drunk. It's okay. Steph said it's okay. My wife said, and she was not too kind to many people. She said, that's the Morrison rule. He can stay. He can leave whenever. Tom gotta go. Tom gotta go. But Doug can stay. Doug can stay forever, as long as he wants to. In our room now, it's called the Morrison. It's called the Morrison room. It's gonna always be that way. I love y'all. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Steve. If it's any consolation, there's a room in my house. It's called the Doug room. Actually, I think he still has some clothes in it. Our next speaker, I know, has been a very dear, lifelong friend of Doug's. Again, a person that I've met once or twice, but somebody that Doug spoke of very fondly on some of our trips and outings, and a very dear friend to his family. Janice, that again.
Well, this is an amazing evening. It's just like him to bring us all together, right? After so many years of not seeing everyone. So, what a blessing that is. So I have to stay on the script, otherwise it's not going to be pretty. Tonight I would like to share a little tribute I wrote the day we lost our friend. I found comfort in the words I was writing and hoped they would bring comfort to his family and friends. I was honored to be asked to share those words with you tonight. If you grew up in Dutchess Park, you may have been lucky to know this guy. This guy ran through the Burrell's backyard, the Harrison's backyard, all the way up Riverview, the hill, to be at his friend's side when his friend was being told that his father passed away. That was in I think Billy helped me out, 1981? 80. That man is in the room tonight. This guy made a case to his parents to let his friend come live with them so he could finish his high school years at 81, at John Jay. Number 81 is in the house. Keith Curtis. This guy ran into a burning home on Cumberland Road in an attempt to rescue a dog, a family dog, which I know haunted him to this day. This guy had the patience to teach, I've been corrected, 5 of my siblings how to drive, and a stick shift at that. They all sit here today. This guy had the courage, let's call it courage, to pass on many jobs until he found the right one.
I don't think that matches Dory's.
I was trying to find the good word.
Tennis, anyone?
We're going to call it courage. And listen, he even did a day at a stagehand, I think, for 1 or 2 days. This job was the one that would allow him to represent hardworking people, his passion. This guy didn't ask when his friend lost his wife, do I go? He said, do we fly or do we drive? And that was Tom, who's here today. This guy was lucky to witness 1986, when his beloved New York Mets, New York Giants, and Penn State, when it was popular to like Penn State, all won championships. This guy loved his friends fiercely. This guy loved his sister and brother, wherever the camera is, Dave, and their families with all of his heart. This guy loved and adored his daughter, Carrie, and never missed an opportunity to spend with her. This guy was blessed to find love, kindness, devotion, and wonderfulness in his partnership with Rhonda. For that, I'm so grateful for you. Okay, so this is where my hands start shaking and things go to hell real fast. I'm sure each and every person in this room has a this guy's story. Doug was that guy, always willing to lend a hand. Whether you were someone that was moving, going on a trip and needed a ride to the airport, it's typed, we did not plan this. It was like this what everybody knows. I think he took me 5 times, I'm not sure. He would watch your pets while you were away, or just simply check in with you and make sure you were okay. This girl was lucky to have this guy as a friend for 45 years. I will miss all of the calls that started with, hey, just checking in to see how you're doing. How's everybody? Rest easy, my friend.
Our next speaker, unlike all of those that come before him, is a new adopted friend, a new person to our work inner circle. If I could say new, he hasn't actually been that new. Chris Ludlow.
So Doug was the best coworker you could ever ask for. I had the pleasure of working with him for a decade, and we never had a disagreement or a cross word, which when working in the field of public employees and politics is quite the accomplishment. This past Friday, several of Doug's coworkers had the opportunity to reminisce and share stories. One of these coworkers, who I will not name, but I will say is the oldest current CSEA employee by about 15 years, and whose name rhymes with Harry, described Doug the best. He was a gentle man. Surely a gentleman in every sense of the word, rarely if ever raising his voice or getting frustrated, and always treating those he met fairly and respectfully. But more than that, Doug was truly a gentle soul, someone you could always rely on, and whom everybody, fortunate enough to know him, realized just what an honor and privilege that was. Not that all of Doug's traits were outstanding. Organizationally, he was a complete disaster. He's also the only employee of CSEA I know that had 3 individual offices within the same building. So whenever you were looking for Doug at work, you always start in Rhonda's office. This is where he spent the majority of his time at work. I am blown away that Doug and Rhonda got on as well as they did. Most people cannot imagine working with someone all day and living with them as well, but to you two, it was the perfect situation. Rhonda, Doug was so blessed to have you with him. In fact, you were truly his rock when his first life partner, Glenn, retired from CSEA. If by some small chance Doug was not in Rhonda's office, you'd then venture to the small conference room, where Doug would normally be hunkered down, writing things longhand in a notebook. I think it's fair to say computers were not Doug's thing, and I don't recall him ever returning an email from me in all the time we worked together. In fact, he was one of the last people I knew to convert from a flip phone to a smartphone, but once he made the leap, he was playing word games nonstop, all the time, and he couldn't seem to figure out why his battery was so bad. So if Doug wasn't in either of those rooms, you'd venture down a hallway to the most unlikely place he'd possibly be, his own office. Doug's office is a shrine to the decades he spent with CSEA, as he has kept every file and piece of paper he's ever worked on. We're currently working with Dutchess County authorities to stop them from condemning the office as a fire hazard. See how that goes. Doug worked so hard for the members of CSEA that he represented throughout Dutchess County. One of my favorite memories involves us going door to door in Wappingers Falls to campaign against the closure of the village police force. We'd hit doors late into the night because that's when folks were home. Doug truly cared for all of our members, even those that occasionally could be a little extra, as the young folks say. Did I do that right, Audrey? Extra? Okay, extra. During our time working together, it was always so clear how much Doug loved and cherished the people in his life. His Rhonda, his daughter Carrie, his stepdaughter Jen, and her partner Jordan, Audrey, Peyton, Landon. Those kids were the light of his life, and you could tell how much joy he got from spending time with them. Although this ending is certainly not fair, and it came far too soon for all of us, I know that we will always keep Doug with us in our hearts and in our actions. I know that personally, I'm going to endeavor to be a more patient and kind person, like Doug was, which is something the world needs a little more of. We need more Dougs. So until we meet again, my friend, we will always remember you, and we love you.
Chris, let me just follow up with a few quick moments. You left out several very important pieces. One, you'd probably find him in the lunchroom before his office. Two, you never experienced Doug throwing a television out the window at a Mets loss. Other than that, you were right on point. Thanks, Chris. You were a wonderful friend to Doug. Our next speaker is one of the previously mentioned, the Lunch Bunch. The newcomer on the scene. When I say newcomer, I mean less than 20 years. A very dear friend, Howard Ball.
So there's only one way that I can do this.
Oh.
So I got my blue shirt. Anybody see my glasses?
Where's the stripes?
What do you want? So I actually don't need the glasses, but Doug always did. He could never find them, even when they were on his face. So what can I say about Doug Morris? I know it's Morrison, but if you know, you know. You know, I always passionately voiced my opinion about anything and everything. And Doug would always jokingly say to me, okay, but can you tell us how you really feel? So I'm going to try my best. So I met Doug almost 16 years ago when I started working for CSEA. I was immediately drawn to his humor and wit. He quickly and easily became my friend. Maybe I was impressed with his remarkable organizational skills. Everything was always so neat and in order. All right, so we know that's not true. We know that's not true. As hard as I've tried over the years, I just couldn't keep up with his disorganization. Because believe me, I'm disorganized, but not even on a level where Doug was. Just a stroll past his office, the actual office, was very telling of this. Among many other things that are buried in there, I'm not even sure there was a desk. There may be. He did always make sure his gas tank was full, though, so that was important. Yeah, so that's not really true either. He's run out of gas several times in the past. You know, I heard everybody saying before that he finally grew up. I don't know that grown-ups run out of gas. I don't think Doug ever really grew up. You know, he'd often gamble with the miles to empty light in his car. You know, I think he was always trying to beat his personal best to see how far he could make it, and unfortunately, sometimes the car won. I was so fortunate to get an extended lunch one time when we backed out of the parking spot and the car stalled right there in the middle of the parking lot. Yeah, he was out of gas. And from that day forward, I would check his fuel level before we went anywhere if I was riding with him. You know, maybe I was drawn to his extraordinary keenness and knowledge for the latest technology. He was a real whiz kid when it came to computers and cell phones. Okay, so that's not true either. His keenness in technology, I think, was stuck somewhere in 1999, maybe. I think the only reason his cell phone voicemail was always full was because he didn't know how to check it and delete it. I'm not sure how or if he ever navigated his email. He used to bust on all of us with our unnecessary phones that seemed to be smarter than his flip phone from the 90s. Of course, that was only until the day he got a smartphone himself, and then he was always had his face buried in his game of Ruzzle and Word. You know, Chris and I really didn't talk before, but it's amazing how extraordinarily similar these are. So, you know, what was it? You know, it clearly had to be his top-of-the-line interest in top-of-the-line automobiles, high-performance automobiles. You know, over the years, it seems he upgraded to the newest, most advanced, and fastest car every year. I mean, when I first met him, he had a practically base model Honda that was like 10 years old. You wouldn't believe the options and the performance, or lack thereof. But he was actively and aggressively car shopping when I first met him, or so he said. It was several years later when he finally upgraded to a top-of-the-line base model used Ford Fusion. But he immediately began an active and aggressive search for his next vehicle acquisition. You can tell he really meant business this time, though, because several years later, he landed his practically base model Ford Focus, a real performance automobile for sure. Okay, so he was very practical and frugal when it came to vehicles. He would take years of thought and research before pulling the trigger on a car purchase. Surprisingly, all of those years of thought and research led him to a lower-end Ford Focus with transmission problems, but that was Doug. He did always have his ear to the ground when it came to the latest entertainment and pop culture. He really knew what was going on in the world. Imagine to all of our surprise when we had to regularly explain to him what certain song lyrics, slang words, or sayings actually meant. I was pretty stunned most of the time, being 10 years his junior, and having to explain these things to him so often. So yeah, he was actually very square and a little naive most of the time. You know, obviously he was woefully disorganized. He had no clue when it came to technology. He couldn't care less what vehicle he drove, and he was actually a pretty square guy. But these are just some of the things we all loved about Doug. He was a misfit, but yet he was a perfect fit at the same time. He was the type of guy that went above and beyond to help others, never wanting anything in return. When we really start talking about his character and who he was, that's what really showed through, well beyond all of his quirkiness that I've already mentioned. If you didn't have admiration for him, you didn't know him. When having scheduling conflicts, he would cover many things for me like he did many of us. Without question, he wouldn't even accept a thank you, let alone anything else. You know, and then the couple times that I would cover something for him, he'd talk about it for months like it was some act of heroism. I'm sure many of us could tell similar stories. Doug was also the kindest, most thoughtful, and selfless person I ever knew. Just one example of this, he and I roomed together for a training in Saratoga. Apparently, I'm an extremely loud and non-rhythmic snorer. So the first morning I awoke to Doug on the couch, all the way on the other side. We had a nice room. It was a suite. There was a couch all the way on the other side of the room. He's wrapped in a blanket, and he's almost rocking in a fetal position. It must have been an exceptionally bad night for him. But instead of waking me or trying to smother me with a pillow, He sacrificed his own sleep and sanity to let me sleep. He never even complained about it, though we did laugh about it often, for years after. He had zero patience for never-ending meetings or sitting in traffic, but he had extraordinary patience with people. Even when getting screamed at by an upset member, he'd just take it all in stride. He'd never lose it like most of us wouldn't react. He always found the good in people, no matter what they did or said to him. I often wondered if he truly had an ego, because he never took credit for anything for himself, of all the good things that he was clearly responsible for. You just simply couldn't offend him. And believe me, I tried. When I needed someone to take me to JFK early in the morning for a last-minute flight, Doug was more than willing. I offered my car. He insisted on using his. He beat me to the gas pump before I could fill his tank. And given past experiences, of course, I wanted to make sure we had a full tank of gas. Anyway, when we arrived at the airport, I got out of the car. I put $100 on the passenger seat of his car. He balled it up, threw it out the window, and sped away. The only unusual part of the story for Doug was that he sped away. He never really sped anywhere. But he definitely took off quickly that day, before I could throw the money back in his car. I figured I'd pay him back by buying his lunch several times, but this only worked a couple times until he caught on to what I was doing, and then he would just rush to pay for both of our lunches before I even had the chance. Actually, a few times he even paid before I got there, but I thought over time, we'd eventually balance out, but I'm sure we never actually evened up. A few days ago, Rhonda told me that I was his go-to. I did always make it a point to answer his calls. I didn't think it was because I was his go-to. I answered those calls because he was always there for me. He was always there for everyone else, whenever and wherever we needed. I only have 2 regrets for having Doug as a part of my life. That I didn't know him 20 years earlier, and I won't get 20 more years with him. But I'm a better man today because I did know him. And I clearly couldn't have been his go-to because he was mine, and I will miss him.
Gee, Howard, I didn't realize how quickly you replaced me. Sleeping with my spouse. As many of us have said previously, there's no one in this room that touched Doug more than any of us, who was there in all his times of need. It's his rock and his savior. Dear friend of mine, dear friend of all of ours, Rhonda would like to say a few words. Connie come up too?
No.
You good?
Bear with me,
Those look like Howard's glasses.
do they? I have known Doug for over 27 years. My first encounter was at CSA headquarters on his first day at work. He parked in front of me in the parking lot and blocked me in. They paged the car and the license plate for about 20 minutes, but to no avail. Evidently, he had his sister's car and completely forgot that he was driving it. For all of you that know him, I'm sure you aren't surprised in the least that he forgot what car he was driving. I had to have several other people move their cars so I could get out. Needless to say, I was a wee bit angry. And when I found out the next day whose car it was, I let him know I was a little bit mad for not leaving his keys at the front desk and answering the page to move his car. Years later, he told me, first day we met, and you were all mad at me, I thought you were still really hot, even during your little tizzy fit. Over the years, we became best friends. We would share stories of our lives, the good times as well as the bad. And there were some really bad times for both of us. If you were ever looking for Doug in the office, all you had to do was look in my office. He had a permanent spot with his name on my chair. As you know, life has a way of throwing us heartache. But 10 years ago, circumstances changed in both our lives. And our friendship grew into something very special. I learned that there really are good guys out there, and he was one of them. He made me feel loved and special, something I hadn't felt in a very long time. He made me laugh, and we had so much fun on our adventures. Bob Seger concert, Key West, Gettysburg, Acadia, just to name a few. He adored my family, Jen, Jordan, Audrey, Peyton, Landy. They brought him so much happiness and peace these past 10 years. And they absolutely adored their Dougie. He adored his daughter, Carrie, who would never miss his Tuesday and Thursday visits, as well as his weekend visits. He made sure that we always worked around those days so that he would be there for Carrie and wouldn't miss his time with her, which was very, very important to him. I am so grateful that I have these memories to hold on to. I just told him a few weeks ago that I needed more memories. So he needs to get stronger so we can make more memories, so I can keep them in my heart when it's time for him to go. He told me he would do his best. I knew he was tired, but I wasn't ready to let him go. Sorry. On Wednesday morning before the chemo, he held my face in his hands, and he said to me, "You know how much I love you, right? And that you have made these last 10 years the best years of my life." I felt so much love from him, and we stayed that way for several minutes. I believe he knew his time was coming to an end, and he wanted to prepare me to make sure that I knew he loved me. Since the time he was diagnosed in July, we knew our time together would be short. We were hoping for a year, maybe 2, so we could cross a few more of the things off our bucket list. But that wasn't in the cards. I am so grateful that I was there with him when he passed Thursday morning. I believe he was at peace and exactly where he wanted to be, at home, surrounded by me, Bolt, and Alan. I am so grateful for the support of his sister Dory and her husband Bill and his brother Dave. I could not have been able to get through that day without them. I know he was ready, I wasn't. And I just wanted to have more time with him, but that wasn't fair to him. I know that. But I love this man so much, I just wasn't ready to let him go. But I couldn't fix his pain. All I could do was hold him while he passed and let him know how much I adored and loved him. I'm so grateful for the time we had. Some people never get to experience what we had. There are memories I will hold in my heart forever. Goodbye, my sweet man.
Our final speaker tonight is Doug's beloved niece, Emily Holmes.
All right, so this is the end. Thank God. You know how he likes short and sweet things, so this is going to be very short. He wasn't a religious man, obviously, so it's not a Bible verse or anything. It's just a little passage to remember him by and to leave you all with tonight. Fill not your heart with pain and sorrow, but remember me in every tomorrow. Remember the joy, the laughter, the smiles. I've only gone to rest a little while. Although my leaving causes pain and grief, my going has eased my hurt and given me relief. So dry your eyes and remember me, not as I am now, but as I used to be. Because I remember all of you and look on with a smile. Understand in your hearts I've only gone to rest a little while. As long as I have the love of each of you, I can live my life in the hearts of all of you. Thank you.
In closing, I'd like to thank everybody for indulging us tonight. I think we're all on the same wavelength when it comes to Doug. There aren't many better than him, if any. He's a great man, touched us all very dearly. And once again, I just say how grateful I am as his friend that Rhonda came into his life and he came into hers. Dory, my sympathy goes to you, and Brother Davey, your family, and Bill. We've shared moments together, and hopefully those moments will continue. Keep each other, remember everybody, keep each other in our lives. Rhonda and our so-called lunch bunch would like to invite people to join us for some light refreshments and a cocktail in Doug's honor and memory down the street at our beloved establishment, Sal's. So if anybody would like to meet up with us there shortly after we leave from here, we welcome you to join us this evening. Again, thank you everybody for your time, prayers, and good wishes. I just wish Doug was here to see how much he touched people and how many people he touched. Doug was not the type of person who would have ever believed that he had this kind of support and friendship from so many. Thank you all. Try and have a holiday, joyous season. It's not going to be easy. Thank you. Those jeans like that.